Scott Russell, I think we'd all agree that this globalist agenda of collapsing things is showing us all how much of a prisoner we are to the financial system. I mean, everybody that's switched on is looking for some way to live outside of the normal now. They're looking for creative ways or ways to get an income. And so people are running off to digital currencies and gold and silver and whatever else. And it's funny, you know, we live under this whole thing of financial freedom. We have to get our financial freedom. And as we try to do that, this whole thing should show us how much of a slave we have been to our own mindset and still are. And many folks that have sent me messages asking, what do I do with my money? And they're a slave to what they own. They're a slave to their finances. They're a slave to a way of life that they're trying desperately to maintain, and they can't generally maintain it anyway. And maybe they can, but they're still a slave to it. And I think if we have to look at objectively at life, we can look and say, people, this time right now in life is showing people that we're a slave to the fiat system. We're a slave to our way of life. We're a slave to our money. And, you know, I've done a few videos on Bitcoin and talking about how the Bitcoin community is furthering the cause of the World Economic Forum while they're thinking they're beating it. And people are saying, well, we got to get an income from somewhere. Yeah, you do. But what you're doing is you're making yourself a slave to another system, and you're making it their whole life. And that's why a lot of these Bitcoiners and crypto people are so aggressive when you criticize it, because they're seeing it as their help. They're seeing it as their savior, something that's going to protect me from what these globalists are doing. No, you're working for the globalists without even knowing it. And I think we could maybe zoom that back even further and say you're working for the God of this world. And the Bible talks about how the God of this world has blinded their eyes, blinded our eyes. Blinded it to what? Blinded it to the fact that there's no freedom when you're living that way of life. I believe God meets us in our freedom. God meets us and dances with our soul, in our spirit. And once you've tasted freedom, you can never go back. Once you've tasted a free life, you don't ever go back to being caught up again. And it's like a relationship. If you're in a relationship that's not free and you're being bound, but you've tasted freedom, and I'm not talking about going off and cheating, but tasted the spirit of life and the spirit of what could be, and true love and true freedom and true joy, then good luck going back to trying to make it happen. It never will. Until two parties both surrender and say, I want the freedom of God, the freedom to be in my life. And you can't be free in saying I'm free because I'm following somebody else. No, if you don't get the revelation of it, and some of you know that, you've talked to your family, your friends, and people around your life about freedom, and they don't get it. Well, I'm free. What are you talking about? No, you don't understand. You're not free. And you've tried, right? And they can't get through. And that's what God's done to us. So many times people come to you and say, hey, you're a slave. I'm not a slave. How dare you say that? I'm free. Look at everything I've got around me. No, you're a slave. You don't understand freedom, and you never will understand freedom. Because freedom is a movement of the heart. I like to call it a spiritually romantic movement. And you can't explain romance to someone. You can't define romance because it's so unique. When you meet somebody that's truly that same resonance with your spirit, that romance is there. But you can't go and then teach somebody else that and say, hey, you know, that woman and I, we had this. And you can tell them that and they'll laugh and they'll smile about it. But they've never entered the spirit of it, and they never can, because it's your romance. And that's God's with you. And I think many of us at this time are being confronted with our lives, confronted with what freedom is, confronted with how much we truly are a slave of the system that we've been working in and around and trying to exist in. And you can look and say, well, how do I live if I'm not part of the system? And I've lived 20 odd years like that. So I'm not in the system, but I'm not of the system, but I'm in the system. Well, I like to say I'm off the grid while living in the grid. And there is a way. And when you are free, when inside of you are free, when your spirit is free, it can never be limited. And when I start to go towards things that are not freedom, I feel like no. And freedom is not growing potatoes in your backyard and hoping that you can survive off of those potatoes. Nothing wrong with doing that, and maybe we need to do that. But that's not your answer. Because if you think that's your answer, you're going to become a slave to your potatoes. These people that say, we're going to live off grid, we're going to buy a farm, and we're going to start a community, and we're all going to be out there, it's not realistic. Because as they come in with digital IDs, digital titles, digital everything, you know, you're going to have to live so off grid that you won't be able to own land because you won't be able to pay your rates on it. You won't be able to drive a car. You won't be able to have money. What are you going to do? Live in a cave? Bath in a river? But sometimes, somewhere they'll come looking for you, and somebody in your family's going to get sick or die or something, and you're going to have to come into the town to see them. And how are you going to do that? Catch a bus? Well, you can't catch a bus. You don't believe in money. And so people come up with these romantic notions of false romantic notions of what they think they can control. It's all about control, isn't it? I'm going to control my life. I'm going to control this, what they're doing to me. I feel so lost. I've got to get control. Then I feel good. And people, we all strive for control. But I tell you, when you abandon, you abide. When you abandon your control, you abide in life. And that only comes for me because when I know God. When I say, God, I don't understand you. I can't control you. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't understand all of what you do. But you know what? I'm prepared to say, I sense you. I feel you. I know you're there. And I give my life to you. As I surrender to you, I'll walk in that freedom. Then peace comes and I follow the peace. And so many of us have had religious upbringings or experienced religion in some way. And you can always tell people that have had abuse from religion because they'll call it the universe. I follow the universe. Well, friend, if there's a consciousness, then it's a being. If the universe has a consciousness, then it's a being. And if it's a being, we can call it God. It's just words. You're playing games with yourself. And really it's a case of saying, I've been abused by religion, which is no different to the system that's defiling us all now. I turn my back on the systemized religion and I walk in freedom. And when I walk in freedom, it means I surrender. For me, I surrendered to Christ. I surrendered my life and said, I will walk in the freedom of what God has for me. And I live a very free life. People can't understand it. I don't need them to understand it. The right people come and journey with you in it. The right people come and co-journey, and together you walk in freedom. Together you are freedom. Together you bring out each other's better than best. And so I think to be financially free is to say, well, it's a lot of changes and it's different for each one of us uniquely. But for me, I'm not asking you to believe in it. I'm not asking you to agree with it. But for me, it comes from my relationship with Christ. I surrendered the control of Scott and said, God, you walk with me in a marriage that's spiritual, in a marriage that holds us together. And in that, I will trust you, that you have my best interests at heart. And really, when we can't do that, it's only because we don't feel loved. We've been abandoned. You know, maybe your family at some point threw you aside, or friends, or a relationship of some kind, and that abandonment is there, so you want to control. How can I trust God? Well, quite easy, really. You already are. You're feeling the pull of freedom, which to me is divine romance. Just respond. What do you do with romance? You respond. If you try to control it, you push it away. I've had people that I've connected with in that way, and as they try to control the relationship, all they do is push away. You have to abandon to abide and trust those that you really feel that freedom and that love with. That's the community that's going to get you through. God bless you. Keep going. You can win in the end. You can win now and keep winning, no matter what the world does around us.